Good afternoon once again. Good, that's better. Let me take this opportunity to welcome you to this session, the session that deals with regulating accountancy profession in Africa, a subject that is very dear to our hearts because we represent the accountancy profession and we know what our profession is all about. First, let me introduce myself. My name is CPA Benson Okundi. I'm the current chairman of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya. In deliberating this important topic, I'll be supported by a distinguished panel of panelists, and I'll be introducing them shortly to you. Now, the objective of this session is to critically review the pillars of regulation of the accountancy profession in various countries. So we hope that by the end of the session, the delegates will benefit from the panelists on the various pillars that exist in ensuring there's effective regulation of the accountancy profession, including the oversight regulatory bodies. Now, the reason why this session is important, just to provide a background to that, accountancy profession regulation is essential for effective financial reporting and to foster public trust. Therefore, focused and sustained efforts are needed to improve oversight arrangements. Deciding on the appropriate model to regulate the accountancy profession in Africa remains a challenge. This session will address the critical pillars that should be considered in order to design appropriate accountancy profession regulation and explore examples of existing oversights. As you are aware, our profession, the work that we do, is meant to instill public trust and third-party assurance. Unless we are in a position to offer that public trust and third-party assurance, the stakeholders and the users of our services will lose trust in us. There is no doubt that our profession is one that has been infiltrated by quacks, those who are practicing but are not really professionals. And every time we've encountered challenges that point out that our public trust responsibility is in doubt. So we have a challenge as a profession, and we have a challenge in Africa. Now, to that extent, we will be looking at regulation of the profession from two angles. One, as a PAO, what challenges are we experiencing in regulating the profession? And two, over and above PAOs, several regulatory bodies have come up, and there are attempts to create other regulatory bodies in different parts of Africa to provide oversight role over the accountancy profession. So those are the key pillars that we'll be looking at. Regulation at two levels, at the PAO level, and then secondly, other regulatory bodies that have come on board to ensure that the public trust responsibility of our profession is indeed enhanced. So at this point in time, I want to quickly introduce to you the panelists that we have today. Our panelist today is made up of one, Patrick Kabuya on my extreme left. Patrick Kabuya is a senior financial management specialist with the World Bank, a close friend and associate of mine that I've worked with for a long time, and is strongly involved in the work of accountancy profession as part of the World Bank's governance responsibility. Next to Patrick is Admire Ndurunduru, who is currently the executive secretary of the accountancy professional body in Zimbabwe. Admire. Next to Admire is Duncan Majinda. Duncan Majinda is from the Botswana Accountancy Oversight Authority. Botswana Accountancy Oversight Authority, and is the executive director of that authority. So Duncan will provide an oversight to us on this regulatory body other than the accountancy body in the regulation of the profession. Then finally, last but not least, is Derek Nkaja. Derek Nkaja is currently the CEO of Institute of Certified Public Accountants in Uganda. So that's your distinguished panelists. Let's clap for them, even before they start. Okay, fine. Before I call the panelists to start their job, let me share with you just a high-level perspective of Kenya. I keep on saying that if I were to get a chance again to be the chairman of the Institute, I will focus more on my agenda as regulation of the profession. I have few weeks left, actually, a few days left to step down. But if I were to get a chance, I will focus more on the regulation of the profession. Why am I saying that? Because if you're an accountancy body, you're looking at two sides of things. One, you're looking at members. These are members who have come together. But they have come together because of a profession that brings them together. Unless you regulate the profession properly, basically you'll not be discharging your mandate effectively. Now in Kenya, we have an act that was passed by Parliament in 1978, 37 years ago, and was amended in 2008, 30 years down the line, just to recognize the changes in the profession that have taken place. Where we are today, we are actually trying to overhaul the act altogether, not just to amend, but to overhaul the act. And why are we doing that? We are doing that because we've realized that the current act that we have is deficient. It's deficient in several areas, in areas that question the public trust that I talked about earlier on. One aspect of deficiency is around the disciplinary mechanism. As I said earlier, our profession is indeed infiltrated by quacks. So the public wants to see that a professional body like ISPAC has got an independent disciplinary process that is able to handle disciplinary cases and is able to make recommendations and indeed judgments that can restore the public trust. So that is an area that we're looking at. And we look at that area because in the recent past, we've seen many cases of where our members are being accused. Whenever there's a problem, be it in public sector or private sector, our members are being accused of professional misconduct. The other reason why we are keen on amending the Act is because our current Act does not give us the full chain of regulating the profession. The bookkeepers, the clerks, who perform a significant aspect of the value chain accountancy role, currently are not regulated by our Act. Our Act regulates professional accountants who are members of the Institute. We also have members out there, accountants out there, but they're not members of the Institute. So we cannot take any disciplinary action against them. So we are taking action to be able to bring anybody that is involved in the chain of accountancy work, from the bookkeeper, to be regulated. Because these guys play a significant role. And if things go wrong, they taint the name of the profession. So if you don't have an act that is comprehensive and include the entire chain of accountancy profession, then you are significantly exposed. The other third reason why we are keen to amend the act is the control of the examination framework. In Kenya, the examination body is independent from the accounting body, even though the examination body's act is actually incorporated in the Accountancy Act, but they have a separate board and operate independently. A profession is as good as the entire framework regulation, right from the students determining who is going to join the profession, what is the qualification framework. So as a result of that, we've experienced significant challenges that we need to address to ensure that our profession continue to operate effectively. So that's the high-level perspective about Kenya. I think the fourth thing I haven't mentioned is that there are significant attempts in Kenya being pushed by stakeholders and other regulatory bodies that work with our institute to have an independent body called Financial Reporting Oversight Authority. The Financial Reporting Oversight Authority responsibility would be to regulate the PI auditors, public interest entity auditors, together with the PI chief executives. Because as I said earlier on, the accountant is normally put on the spot. And yet, when it comes to the responsibility of the financial statements, it's not just the accountant alone. So there's an attempt to regulate the PI auditors and the PI entities from the feeling that there's a gap that the accountancy body can regulate these particular entities. So those are significant developments that we must be alive to, and we must share experiences from the respective countries that have adopted them. And that's why I'm very glad that Duncan is here with us, because he will share that perspective. So with that introduction, I now want to call upon Patrick Kabuya. Patrick will share with us the various existing guidance on models of regulating the accountancy profession, noting examples of existing oversight in Africa based on the World Bank ROSC, that is report on standards of codes and ethics reports. So Patrick will share with us the various models of regulating the accountancy profession, and then thereafter we'll ask the panelists to contribute accordingly. So thank you. Patrick, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good to see a lot of you and being interested with this topic, and I hope we'll keep it live so that we don't get into what I refer to as the neck disease. Do you know what neck disease is? Huh? I hope we'll keep it live. And if you see your colleague suffering from that disease, just hold on to them. We get asked a lot on these questions when we do our ROSCs, and that's the issue that my chairman was raising is, Patrick and your team, how do we set mechanism in the countries that you're evolving in to regulate the profession? What options, what models, which guidance should we look into to decide how we regulate the profession in our countries? And what I want to do is just to share 3 particular topics why we think about regulating the profession, what we regulate in the profession, and currently the models that exist on countries to consider and the options to consider on which of the 3 models that they can adopt. And I will also try to highlight from World Bank point of view, what do we consider to be key? And these are some aspects I might have met some of you and we've tried to share the same topics before. So I have limited time, so I want to move as quickly as possible. One is, why do we regulate the accountancy profession? And you're dealing with from the accountants and the auditors in the full stream of the different countries that we are engaged with. And the chairman alluded to that fact. It's more about serving and protecting the public interest, not just from the accountants, but from the different professions that we engage into, from 2 different perspectives specifically. The services that we render to the members of the public, or to anyone who has contracted us, there may be a knowledge imbalance. And we need to ensure that that imbalance is being dealt with through the regulation. And secondly, is a lot of work we do as accountants. It does not just benefit the client that we are serving, but also benefits other third parties that may be relying on our financial statements we prepared or the audited reports that we've issued there too. And that becomes important narration. So, and the only way you can achieve that goal is to comply with the stipulated standards in a country, from the accounting, auditing, ethics, and goes into that analogy. So the regulation comes into being to ensure that the members of the profession, if we are dealing now with accountants in this case and the auditors, are truly complying with those stipulated standards so that the services they're offering are of high quality and consistently of the desired quality. And the regulation exists in different forums. I'm sure from the accountants, we have our regulations, the stock exchange, in case you're in a country dealing with stock exchange, the banking sector, the financial services sector, all those are different forms of regulations. But for the time being, we just want to focus from the accountants. So just to specify, we are regulating to ensure accountants are complying with standards and are issuing quality services to the members of the public. Secondly then is, from the accounting point of view, what do we regulate? And from the bank, we always go back to our guiding mother, who is IFAC, and IFAC has issued a guidance, a policy paper in 2011, and we always look back into this guidance to say, what do we regulate in a country, and how should we be considering those aspects? And these are 4 specific ones. One, in your own country, there's someone you consider to be an accountant, there's someone you consider to be an auditor. So there need to be a good regulations on what criteria do you as a country need to have to call a Patrick, he's an accountant, or Patrick is an auditor. So that means the education process. The education obviously includes even the practical experience. It also includes the continuous development mechanism that needs to come into being as far as that individual is concerned, from both accounting and the auditing perspective. And that needs to be regulated by someone within your own country. Who can be an auditor, who can be an accountant, and what is the criteria? Education, practical training, and thereafter. So that's one. Secondly is the standards. We say to comply and to ensure we enhance quality services, you need to comply with standards issued in a country. So at a country level, someone, an institution need to be responsible of issuing those standards. Accounting, auditing, ethics. I'll just focus on those for the time being. What's a structure? What's a mechanism that you have in your country to issue those standards? So I am an accountant, then I have standards which I need to comply with. And that takes me to the third one, the monitoring, behavior, and the performance. Yes, I'm an accountant, I've qualified, met the criteria, I need to comply with the standards, but someone has to check the monitoring and enforcement mechanism of those reviews. And I know in most of the countries, we have the audit quality reviews, there's financial statements reviews in some of the countries that we are dealing with here, and that ensures that mechanism currently exists. So regulation comes on being. Which institution does that, and how does it end up applying at the end of the day? But finally, and most important, and we miss that bit on the regulation, is the disciplinary that follows. If I'm a Patrick, I'm not complying with that mechanism, who will sanction me, what's the process, and what are the type of sanctions that need to be imposed in all that mechanism. And so when we're talking about the regulation of the profession, these are the four facets that one needs to bear in mind and think of which institution will do it and how do they go about doing that mechanism. Okay, so we'll use this as a reference guide at the end. And I guess many of us sitting in this room are from the accountancy profession, and these are things that we end up doing. So the next, almost last slide, the issue is how do we do it? How do we regulate those four different aspects? And IFAC has given, again through the same policy statements, 3 different models that we can adopt. And this has always become our Bible. I use that term loosely, our Bible of what we refer to. One is a self-regulation mechanism, where the professional accountancy body itself undertakes all those 4 different types of the regulations I referred to. You set the criteria who can be an accountant and auditor, you set the standards, you monitor compliance, and you discipline the members there too. And it so happens that in most of the African countries, that happens to be the scenario at the moment. Without even naming names, and I'm sure if you sit around the table, there's a number of us who are sitting in this room, we focusing on that category of the self-regulation. To the extreme left is the external regulation, where you say external regulation refers to establishing the government itself taking the role of having an independent body or an agency that deals with all those 4 aspects that I referred to. So that body is governed by the government, it's financed by government employees, and they are responsibility for setting the criteria, accountants, auditors, standards, performance, and disciplinary mechanism. I've not so far come across any country which is in that extreme left, to the extreme third category, but majority of us are in the middle. In the middle, which is the combined model, where you have some aspects of the 4 being dealt with by and as PAO itself, undertaking some of those responsibilities in those 4 criteria, but on the other aspect, you have some other aspect dealt with by an independent body, and that independent body mainly owned or belonging to the government. So it's a government agency, a government-set agency that tries to undertake those responsibilities. And I can insist that majority of the people moving to, and this is the criteria we'll prefer, is on the second, where you have some combined element out of the 4. So what's the criteria when someone asks us the question? What do you do? What do you consider in order to say, country like Kenya, as Benson was saying, we need to think of an independent oversight from the auditing perspective. And these are the criteria we always refer to in terms of the 6 and become fundamental in terms of shaping the advice we provide. One is the development part of the economy. For a far developed economy, an economy which the GDP is high, which has advanced well, then there's more notion to have an independence level. The number of GDP is high, the number of public interest companies are also higher. So the notion of having some element of independence becomes also important. The regulatory performance of the country. of the government in particular is critical. If you find the government is not having any regulatory mechanism, not just in accounting, but in different fields is very weak, then it's not fair for you to put any organization from the regulatory mechanism to be responsible in the government side, because then things are not going to flow. But if government is strong from regulatory performance, then it becomes fair. Then the past history of the country as far as the past audit failures are concerned. This is becoming a fair phenomenon, and I'm sure you may highlight that from the minister talking about in Mauritius what has happened of late. So if there is that history, that means then you cannot rely a lot on the self-regulation. You need an element of independent regulations comes into being. And then fourth is, how is the professional body strong in terms of the self-regulation? If they get a Patrick, I belong to ISPAC and I'm not performing, do they sanction me? What's the strength of that process? And if you feel it's weak, then we better move in and try to put some of the elements, if there's no capacity and the size, to the independent regulation. And then membership to the international bodies. If you're affiliated, and I know a number of you become IFAC members, there's always that notion you need to comply with the audit quality mechanism into the pipeline, and that all those factors need also to be considered. And finally is the number of professional accountancy bodies within your own country. We finished a ROSC in South Africa, 12 professional bodies, and the element comes in, how do you regulate them? How do you manage them? Zimbabwe, 7 bodies. How do you manage them? Do you want to regulate individually, and what types of element of regulations should come into being? And so these become fundamental and a focus area in shaping and advising the countries on where they need to go into. So there are those 3 different models. But from our perspective, we go into the second one. For a country where we find the level and path of development is high, there is risk in terms of the audit failure, and the government appetite on regulations become good, then we have been advocating for establishment on the independent audit regulator, especially for public interest entities, the auditors, and the financial statements review element. I insist once again, for those where the economy has well advanced, the quality in terms of failure is also increasing, and they have the capacity. We're advocating, yes, still fixed model, the self-regulation and independent, but independent just to focus on public interest entities as far as the audit of PIE and the financial statements review is concerned. For the other countries where I believe that has not been achieved, I would call them at the tier level. Yes, you still have the self-regulation, but within the professional body itself, we've been advocating that they establish a committee, and that committee should be responsible, will be independent, having some independent members, and the results of any audit quality review that may be done, that independent board becomes on par in terms of disciplinary mechanism and sanctioning those members. That's critical to bear in mind. But then for the other countries where the level of development of the profession is at very low maturity, then we mainly focus on strengthening the self-regulation mechanism and undertake to that level. So just trying to highlight within the self-disciplinary mechanism that becomes pertinent. It's worth to mention, almost finally finishing on the independent regulations, we always refer to the bodies that want to go into that level to think about if we are international forum of independent audit regulators. They have a number of principles, 7 + 4 operational principles, ensuring you're independent, you are well mandated with a legal framework to comply and to think of those terms as they set up their own mechanism. Okay? But this is a nutshell I just wanted to highlight to you, and I'm sure we'll hear more in terms of what are the different mechanisms that are currently coming in Africa, different mechanisms, and can form a base of good discussion. I didn't want to take a lot of time, Chair, but thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Well done. Patrick has shared with us the what and how and criteria of the regulation. The what do we regulate? Standards, accounting, auditing standards, the people and the disciplinary process, the how, the self-regulation mechanism, the extreme where an independent body comes in, and then the middle. And I think more importantly, the criteria that need to be considered into deciding the appropriate mode of regulation. I now want to turn to the panelists, and I will ask them to be just very brief and straight to the point. I'll start with Admire. It's a very beautiful name. And we want to admire in advance what he's going to share with us. But in reference to the models presented by Patrick and Maya, briefly share with us the one that you have adopted in your country, highlighting how the accountancy profession is currently regulated, legislated, governed. It sounds loaded, but just make it brief and to the point. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I'm clear at the back there. Patrick, thank you for laying the structure and foundation. You defined the 4 aspects that are regulated, the 3 models that are in use now. But I'll pose a question before we look at the structure that we adopted in Zimbabwe. What is regulation? Not regulation of the accountancy profession. What is regulation? Regulation, to me, is an intervention by the state to correct things when the market would have failed. So basically, that's regulation. So we need the state to intervene. So for regulation, for any model that you would adopt of the 3 that Patrick has mentioned, there is need for a legal framework that supports the regulation that you will be implementing. I will then go to the specific regulatory structure in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, as Patrick mentioned, we have 7 professional bodies, the oldest having been established in 1918, and it has been operating since then. In 1996, the government of Zimbabwe, I think they were inspired by something from somewhere, they came up with a law, which is called the Public Accountants and Auditors Act, which established a standalone, I'm trying to avoid the use of the word independent, a standalone regulatory body for the accountancy profession, 1996, and it has been working thus. Following ROSC, I think the World Bank came in and made a few recommendations in strengthening that standalone body to be an independent regulator of the accountancy profession, not an independent audit regulator, but of the whole-wide accountancy profession. I'm glad to report that those amendments and the new law came into effect 2 weeks ago, where the body was strengthened to be an independent regulator of the accountancy profession. Looking at the 4 aspects that Patrick mentioned in terms of regulation, the technology that we use in accounting and auditing through standard setting, education and the entry requirements for the profession. What else is regulated? Practice rights and the use of accounting in economic activity to regulate economic activity. So that's where we are. We have an independent body which is tasked with setting standards for the accountancy profession, not auditing standards, but accounting standards for the profession. So it's the reporting standards for the private sector, which we normally call IFRS, right? The reporting standards for the public sector, called, I think there's a promotion of IPSAS that is happening here, and we're saying we need to migrate to that. And the ethics standards, education standards. When the law was crafted to come up with the independent regulator of the profession, it covers the profession as a whole, not regulation of the profession which is looking at the private sector or looking at the public sector. It covers both the public and private sector, both accounting and auditing. Accounting, we have the supply chain of accounting from the lowest level, those that train accounting technician, to when we have proper, fully fledged professional accountants. So those are regulated under the scheme. So the question from my chairman is, what model have we adopted? There are 4 aspects that Patrick raised in terms of what is regulated. And the model that we have taken in Zimbabwe is that, Patrick, you mentioned mixed regulation. I prefer shared regulation, where there are some aspects which are resident in the independent regulator of the profession, and there are some aspects which are regulated at the PAO level. The issues of education, training, monitoring of CPD, that is self-regulation at the institute level with oversight by the regulator. Determining and awarding practice rights, that is the role of the independent regulator. Who can be an auditor in this jurisdiction? Who can be an accountant? We look at the role of regulation in regulating economic activity. What should different levels of companies, be it SMEs or listed companies, what reporting framework should be used in the country? That is upstairs at the regulator. So we have a model of shared regulation. For us, thus far it has been working. We need to regulate, I said at the beginning, the state intervenes to correct certain issues. But for regulation, whatever form of regulation to work, be it self-regulation, mixed regulation, or a completely independent regulation, there is need for cooperation between the regulator and the regulated. Otherwise, the cost of regulation will exceed the benefits. The system of shared regulation that we are using currently in Zimbabwe, for me it has worked. I think all of us, you recall that 12 or so years ago, we had an economic crisis. We hope we're coming out of that now. But I can stand up and testify now. There was no single corporate collapse due to the failure of accounting and auditing. So regulation is important. Sharing the responsibilities of regulation is important, and there is need for collaboration and support between the regulated and the regulator. Thank you for now, Chairman.
Thank you, Admire. So, shared regulation. Derek, what's the regulatory framework of the profession in Uganda?
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to make a disclaimer that these are my thoughts, despite the fact that I'm going to give them from the picture we have from home. Yes, it may be that the Institute has a different view and the country has a different view, but this is what I observe as a person on a daily basis, promotes accountancy and regulates accountancy in Uganda. We all have to understand that regulation is like internal controls. And internal controls must be fit for purpose and they must be cost effective so that you do not override the intention of the cost. It's important to understand also, as Patrick said, the drive of the economy or the trajectory the economy is taking, and then make sure that the right regulation is in place. 2013, we got a revised law. The Institute, by the way, just to recap a bit, the Institute is very young. It was set up in 1992, that's the Act. The Secretariat was opened in 1994. So we are very young, but we are doing good things. In 2013, we changed the Act and we created an independent board within the Institute to look at audit quality and also review the operations of the auditors. Now that independent board, unfortunately, has not started operations because it needs regulation. We wanted to have it start running, but our Solicitor General said anything that needs regulation, the regulations must be formally gazetted before you start that board. So the board has not yet started, but we still believe that as Uganda, it is a model that will work because of the public interest we are trying to safeguard. I don't know how many people know about Uganda, but if you look at the stock exchange of Uganda, actually, if we use the East African, if you add the East African Stock Exchange, Altogether, I think it is less than a half of Johannesburg. So if you are trying to look at public interest, knowing the fact that the banks are supervised by the central bank, the insurance companies have an independent insurance regulator, so the public interest you are safeguarding is really small. And one of the things we have to do as accountants when we are looking at regulation is to create employment. We are all listening to the cries of the people who are crossing Mediterranean Sea. And one of the challenges when you look back, it's the lack of employment in those countries. So when you're trying to do a regulation, make sure that you're able to develop the profession. One of the challenges we had in Uganda is the uptake of accountancy services. The accountancy services, being that the profession was young, was to try and educate the companies that actually you can use professional accountants and they can add value to your company. Now that's a challenge because majority of the companies in Uganda are family run. And if you are talking about a family-run business and professional accountancy, those two do not make sense to that person. So we need to understand that the model we try to run, the model we're currently running in Uganda, is a model that has been tested based on the stakeholder feedback. I'm glad to mention that actually the recent ROSC that was done, the stakeholders gave credit to the institute that they have tried to do their best and they think they should be given a chance with the model that is newly created in the Act. I don't know whether the World Bank has issued the report, but I'm speaking from the draft that was made, that the stakeholders also understand that public interest is crucial, but it must not override the way it can be achieved vis-a-vis the economic development of the country. So, Mr. Chairman, in summary, I think I will stop there. Probably one extra item which I may add is, like Admire said, when you are trying to do regulation, let's be aware of the accountancy supply chain. The accountancy supply chain, for instance, when you are making our law, the preparers were excluded. And it was a tug of war at the floor of Parliament. Professional accountants saying something different and the politicians also saying something different. And some of the preparers were left to walk scot-free, if I can borrow that word. We have not had a failure due to financial reporting or auditing, but you worry that if the preparers are not in the loop, and yet they are the ones who understand the business model of the company, there is a likelihood that the auditors may not see what actually the preparers are doing.
Thank you, Derek. Key messages out of your perspective, or Uganda's perspective: an independent board within the institute to look at the work of auditors in terms of the quality assurance, and stakeholders consulted to influence or to determine the kind of the regulatory model that is necessary. I also picked up a common message now between the two panelists so far, that it's critical to look at the entire chain, the entire supply chain of the accountancy profession, for us to ensure that we regulate the profession in its entirety. So far, so good. It's coming up very well. We now want to shift a little bit and look at an oversight body within Botswana, and I will be directing this question to Duncan. Duncan, Botswana has a Financial Reporting Act 2010 that governs functions, governances, and operations arrangements of your independent oversight institution, that is BAOA. It is fundamental to have such an act. Share with us the approach followed to develop and enact the act. What was the role of the profession in coming up with that act? and what was the role of the government? And more importantly, what were some of the challenges that were encountered and how were they addressed? So Duncan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me start by clarifying that we are one of the recognized global independent auditors in the world. In Africa, we are only 4. When you say you are an independent audit regulator, it's different from you are an independent regulator. So we are an independent audit regulator. The other countries, South Africa and Egypt and Mauritius. The whole issue of independence, I am just giving you background because when you then try to craft your law, you have first to look at what it is that you want to put in that law. And the issue that was of significance was that we have to be independent. And independent means independent of the profession. And who is the profession? The profession will be the accountants, me and you, the auditors, the PAO itself, and other accounting players like accounting technicians. Those are the regulated. So you got to know, you got to determine. I think we did a good thing because when we were looking at the oversight, coming up with law for the oversight, we also revised the law for the institute. Otherwise, there were going to be significant conflicts. And by doing that, in fact, they were passed at the same parliamentary sitting. And I am here, if there is any problem, I was the advisor to the minister when he presented that for the Accountants Act, which relates to the PAO, and also for the Financial Reporting Act, which relates to the independent oversight. So let's go a little bit to independence. Independence, we decided that who are the key stakeholders in the country that could form the board of the independent oversight. Because we are trying to run away from the profession in order for us to be independent. So we started by saying the central bank, the stock exchange, the non-bank financial institutions, the regulatory authority, the private sector body in Botswana, the BURS, and the accountant general. So there were 6 ex-official members there. You can see already it's very, very independent. And we made it a point that within that law, there is no participation of practicing members, of auditors at all. Yeah. Because they form a significant part of the audited in terms of audit regulation. And having said that, we have an independent, we realized that, okay, we need to have some experts in the board, 3. The first one was to come from academia. So we have one from the university. He's here, I've seen him somewhere. And we have 2 from the PAO. Those 2 must not be practicing members. So you see now we have an independent board with 3 experts. Once we determined that, that becomes incorporated into the act. Now we are going back now to the issue of the regulated. And in looking at the regulated, let me tell you an interesting thing. We had actually excluded technician accountants in the regulated. And it was quite a hotly debated issue in Parliament. And Parliament said, if you exclude the accounting technicians, then we are not passing this law. And then at the very last minute, we included accounting technicians. So accounting technicians are significant players in the accounting profession. And they must be regulated just like any other player in the economy of Botswana. Let me clarify this other important issue. In Botswana, everybody who provides accounting services for either a fee or a salary must be registered. You see where we're coming from? Yeah. If you are providing accounting services or accounting-related services for either a fee or a salary, salary means you are employed by someone. But if you are providing professional accounting services, you must be registered. The bad news is here. If you are not registered and you are caught, then there are significant penalties. And the penalties could include a huge fine of, in our currency, something like something like 500,000 rand, or 10 years, or both. So that is in our law. So if you just can't go moonlighting or go doing accounting work, because if you are caught, you are in serious trouble. So I think that has controlled the profession somewhat. And then we came to what Patrick talked about. And because the laws were passed at the same time, we say, okay, there are certain groups or certain players that can be regulated by the institute, by the PAO. And those are accountants and accounting technicians. But there are certain players that can only be regulated by the independent oversight. That will be the PAO itself. It's in the law. The PAO is supervised by the independent body and the auditors. There was a small change because Botswana is small, so our number of auditors are few. So we sat down and say, okay, initially we had said only auditors of public interest entities. And then we realized since there are few, why divide them? So all auditors in Botswana are regulated by the officer. And because that came after the law, we went and come up with a memorandum of understanding with the institute that we will be doing the oversight for them, for the auditors, and we will be issuing them reports. Yeah. Having said that, it's a whole comprehensive issue when you craft your legislation, and it's a pity if you come with the one for the financial reporting or the oversight after you have already done one for the PAO, because there are definitely going to be conflicts. Because in the one that you have with the PAO, there will be certain things that have to move out of there. So it's always advisable that when you come up with an independent law for the independent body, you also review the law for the existing PAO. Important issues you go to look at is how do you fund it? I think that is critical. All that I'm talking about, we try to incorporate in the law. The Botswana government was quite understanding, and it liked the idea. It saw the importance of having an independent regulator and the role it plays in the whole issue of public interest protection. And they decided that it is our problem. So for the first 3 years, I'll say first 3 years up to now, I can't talk of the front, they have been funding the oversight profession 100%. Yeah. And I think that is good. That is good because you cannot go to the profession and say, I'm regulating you and pay. Because you know what they're going to do. The reaction is going to be mixed. I think you have to adopt a bit-by-bit approach, a piecemeal approach, and say, okay, this is what we are going to do. We are going to to share equally or otherwise the cost of oversight. So in Botswana, it's quite clear the government means business. So when we were doing that, what was very important was to involve the profession. The profession is a key player. If the profession does not want to go into it, I tell you, you'll find it very difficult. Yeah? It's very difficult. It was even difficult. The only thing, when that was done, I was still the chief executive of the institute, of the PAO, and it was sad because I could see all the disadvantages of self-regulation, and I was fighting. And one of the top guys in the country, top accountants in the country, after fighting if you want to call it that, when I left, and he said, you know, Duncan, you are not very smart. I used to think you are smart because what you have done there, you have just kissed your job goodbye because the PAO is going to take over from that. So I understood that. I know the boundaries. I know there is what to be done by the PAO and what's done by the institute. Let me maybe touch on the okay. To summarize, I can say, because my question is crafting the legislation, first of all, look at what my two colleagues have called the entire professional accountancy supply chain. And then determine, based on that, where you are going to fit into there. I think the problem here is not just for you to decide, is the government interested? Do we have buy-in from the government? And is the profession interested? If you are unfortunate, as most of you are, you may find that the government is not interested. And the profession is not interested as well, because they don't want to be regulated. So without the government, I think we'll find it increasingly difficult to try and impose that upon the accountants. It's extremely difficult. That's my summary.
Thank you, Duncan. Let's clap for him. So we've heard from an independent regulator. Within the short time, he's given us an oversight of what the body does. This is an independent body that regulates the auditors and the PAO itself, while the PAO has got specific functions that it carries out. I think he emphasized on the need for independence and gave us the bodies that form part of that board to ensure that it is independence both in action and also both in perception. I wanted to ask you a follow-up question, Duncan, but you've responded to it. I wanted to ask you, what would you advise a country that is in the process or is thinking of having an oversight body like the one that you have in Botswana? But I think you've articulated some very significant points. One, working very closely with the profession is extremely important. You really need to get the buy-in of the profession and clearly understand the responsibilities of what the professional body is going to do and what this independent body is going to do. And then getting the buy-in of the government is also critical so that you don't enter into something that doesn't have the full blessing of the government. So thanks again for explaining the rationale for that and setting it out very clearly to us. So we move on. I know the delegates have a number of questions, but before that, I'll ask two more questions to the panelists. So we move on. Admire, we are experiencing several instances or incidences of corporate failures in Africa. You know, in the past, when these corporate failures were just associated with Europe and with the US, but they are now coming home. In the opening ceremony on Monday, the Minister for Tourism in Mauritius did mention to us some significant corporate failures in the area of investment and banking. And back home in Kenya, this is becoming almost a norm. And the first question that we are asked, where were the auditors and where were the accountants? Even in instances where those who are not members of the profession have been directly involved. Where do you think we have gone wrong as a profession? And what do you think we can do briefly to address that problem?
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair. Where was the accountant? Where was the auditor? That question is asked often. My response is the accountant was there. And the auditor was there. Since we are talking about regulation, I think in my remarks I said regulation is of the profession, not just audit regulation, because audit comes at the tail end. Who is preparing those accounts? Who understands the day-to-day operation of the business? Current audit requirements, the auditor reports to who? To those charged with governance. So if it's those people that are charged with governance who are playing games that are leading to corporate failures, what more do you expect the auditor to do? He has prepared his report, advised those charged with governance that these issues are not on, but it is the same people that he is reporting to that are playing the games. What can we do as a profession? I have a very good example from our colleagues in South Africa, where the auditor has been given a gateway to report not just to those charged with governance, but if they notice irregularities during the course of the audit, they go and flag the issues to the independent regulator. And then the independent regulator will then raise awareness with the other regulators. So how do we resolve that? As the profession and as regulators of the profession, we need to work in collaboration. We need to work together with other regulators. There is no need to create silos. We are just regulating the accountancy profession. Let the central banks regulate banks. We need to cooperate with the other regulators. What are the issues that are coming out from audits? That way, we can protect the public interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Admire. Cooperating with other regulators is extremely important to be able to address this issue, just to ensure that the entire chain of regulation is taken into consideration. Derek, the IFAC SMOs in terms of the quality assurance is very specific on the need for the PAOs to conduct audit quality reviews, oversight of the auditors. The ROSC A&A done by the World Bank in Africa report that the mechanism, capacity, and of those of the PAOs is wanting in the area of quality assurance. What do you think we can do to strengthen the audit quality reviews to be able to enhance or strengthen the capacity of the PAOs?
Thank you, Chair. That's a very interesting question, and being a member of the Compliance Advisory Panel, representing all of you, you are putting me in a very tricky scenario on how to answer that. But we all have to understand that as a profession, I think we are the best profession in the world that self-regulates itself, or self-regulates. And that aspect, we should not shy away from it. There are tendencies always to shy away from the good things that we do. Now, if I am to link it with market failures, majority of the market failures that have occurred are not necessarily as a result of failure of accountants or failure of auditing. These are business models that have gone wrong. Unless the profession starts to look at the business models and the auditor is able to assure the public on the business model of the company, not opinion on financial statements, then we can have a good starting point to debate. But what should the profession do to strengthen the audit quality assurance and the practitioners who are doing? IFAC has every framework required, or has developed the framework required under SMO1 for quality assurance, and the audit quality reviews that can NAPOA minimally try to use and ensure that their auditors are doing the right thing. If I may use the example we have in Uganda, 2007, when the regulation for audit quality reviews came into play, majority of the XAFA members adopted an external reviewer to come and do a quality assessment of the practitioners. But it was not cost effective. So as the institute and the regulator in Uganda, we undertook a stakeholder engagement, and everyone agreed that we set up our own model, our own team to regulate. I know if Vixon is around, we got some criticism at the start, because at the start what we did was to pick members from the Big Four to create the team and train, in the process, train those who are going to remain into the team. But I can assure you that it is a question of willingness that I'm going to undertake an audit quality review for all my practitioners. And then you deliberately set out to create that model that you are going to use. As we speak right now, our audit quality team has been reviewed twice by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Scotland, and we have not found significant differences from the model they are using. So as I speak, as the CEO of the Institute, I can confidently say that we have one of the best audit quality review teams or audit quality review models on the African continent. But do people know that? That's where the challenge comes in. That much as you are going to set up the right model, the public interest and the other stakeholders must have comfort with what you are doing. One of the examples we had to sell our audit quality review to the central bank. And you know central banks, they are the alpha and the omega on everything. And they were not listening. They have the role of pre-qualifying auditors for financial institutions, for banks. And we are worried that some of the firms they are putting on the list are firms that, as the institute, through the audit quality review, we are not comfortable for them to audit the financial institutions. And then we asked them a question: give us your methodology of your selection. They don't want to disclose. And then we just decided to be very open and say, according to our audit quality review methodology and the reviews that have been done, the following lists to us are a risk. The following firms to us are a risk, and we don't think they should audit a financial institution. So when you are setting out any audit quality review for this, whatever scheme you are doing, make sure that the other people on the other side of the divide are able to understand what you are doing, and that's what you'll be using to grow your audit quality review.
Good. The best, or should I modify to say one of the best in Africa? Okay. Good. All right. Final one to the panelists before I come back to the delegates. Patrick, a number of the POs in Africa are struggling financially and therefore may not be in a position to regulate the profession effectively. What are some of the available funding options that you can share with the delegates?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I guess this is a topic which might have been highlighted in a number of the sessions. I recall even yesterday's session on PAO development. And what I would like to highlight up front, PAFA has developed a very good guide And that guide is in the website of PAFA. We assisted them to prepare it, and it talks about the different options of where you can raise revenue for a professional accountancy body. So I encourage all of you to go to the PAFA website, and you can try to get that notion and learn a lot. So I'm not going to cover in too much details. And in terms of sharing, then, using the shared model, there are those traditional ways we always raise our money as a PAO or as a regulator, saying from membership fees. And I was amazed to see some of the PAOs still raise 100% of their fee from the membership, which is not sustainable. We can get money from the government. In some instances, you say it for you, 100% from the government. PAOs, rarely do you get a lot of that adequacy from government. We sanction. In some sanctions, we get some money out of it. For those doing audit quality reviews, there is some money that we can charge for those audit quality reviews. And Chair, you've allowed, I've seen Bernard here. Bernard, I would encourage you just to share with the group the model you adopt to charge for the audit quality reviews. Yeah, I know you used to do before based on time, but you currently have a special model that people can learn from South Africa and adopt, and then CPD. But I want to focus more on the non-traditional one. And non-traditional is being innovative and using technology. And as an example of that is, I don't know how many of you have thought of doing a research on a thought area, and that research can be helping the government, can be helping the private sector in terms of policy, and you use that or you privilege that from funding from partners or funding from the government as a bank. Could start thinking of those thoughts. I don't know how many of you have tried to think of products that you can offer to your members. I know you do this in Kenya and in South Africa in terms of insurance, member discounts, or loyalty programs. And based on the companies where you're getting these types of products from, you get a portion coming back to the professional body. And that can become revenue that you can use in a different ways to try to modify you. There is job sites, and see Terence here from South Africa. They come with a career suite where in case you're looking for an accountant through their career portal, you can get the information on anywhere. You can advertise for your position, and there's a charge that you pay for it, or anyone who is in the human resource point of view. Advertising, leverage on the digital. You have websites in a number of PAOs. Are you inviting companies to advertise within your website and get some money out of that portion of it? PAO premises. Some premises you may have things that are floating outside your building, and you can advertise through that digital process. In seminars, and let's say you can also try to get sponsorship from those seminars. If you're doing articleship mechanism through those articleship, are you charging the trainee offices? And you can also charge the trainees themselves from the administrative point of view. So all those are just some few areas that I've felt that you can get the funding from non-traditional. And as we develop, you end up getting into a situation where countries like UK, Financial Reporting Council as an example, their 2013-2014 budget, more than 62% of their budget is funded by a preparer's fee. So we're in an economy where the preparers who are being reviewed on the quality of financial statements and who believe the quality of financial statements are important, pay a levy towards the regulator. But I guess from Africa, we still have a long way to go. So Chair, maybe I'm just trying to advocate from the team around, just study a lot from that guideline that is in the PAFA website, and if there's time, maybe Bernard can also share briefly on that notion. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, for that. Derek, just a follow-up comment?
I just wanted to mention the fact that the cost of regulation and the cost of running the profession is a very big challenge. The models that Patrick has mentioned are actually very good. But as you sit there and you try to implement them, I worry, this is my individual thought, I worry that there is a notion from the public that accountants, we have commercialized the profession. And there's a danger of wondering whether we're a profession or we're a commercial center. I just thought maybe there's anyone somewhere there who can, because you have to really balance whether we are professionals or we are a commercial center selling accountants, selling professional accounting.
That's a very interesting perspective that it will be good to hear from the delegates what they are saying. So we now come to, sorry, excuse me. We come to the question part. I know you've been listening, and those who had It's called what? The neck sickness. As described by Patrick earlier, I think this is time to recover from that sickness fully. And, but fortunately, I mean, you've really been very active. I must congratulate you for that. We are going to ask questions, and I can see FCPA Caroline is here because I want to make a description of the type of the question or the nature of the question that you should ask. I think yesterday she made a description of that question. I may not get it right, but it should be like a woman's dress, which is beautiful or short enough to be admired, but long enough to cover the subject matter. Okay. My side of it is that make the question very short and sweet. Very short and sweet. So please, these are the rules to the game. Tell us who you are. Tell us who you are, the country you come from, and just make it short and very, very sweet. I'll start with my brother over there from... You've posted it already? Okay, just take the mic and ask a question, yeah.
I thought she was going before me because Caroline was advocating for ladies yesterday. But anyway, what's happening here? Thank you. My name is Mangangola Tsikinyane from Lesotho. Let me not particularly say who should answer. I think everybody can answer this one. Taking you a bit further, how do we balance between the notion of innocent until proven guilty and the public protection duty? Here you have your member here who had committed a criminal offense, and it is reported to the institute where you do self-regulation. But now it takes over for the courts to solve the case. Bearing in mind that they may have been framed, and but the public also may be saying you're doing nothing about it as the regulator.
That's a good one. I'll come to the middle here. Caroline, I think your hand was up earlier. Yeah.
Thank you, and I'm Caroline Keegan from Kenya, and also the chair of the PODC. I have two things. One is a comment. The issue of regulation of the profession, whether it's independent regulation, audit regulator or independent regulation, is coming. And as PAOs, I think we would be wise to drive that process and to ensure that we take into account the concerns from our members and also the concerns from the public and protection of the public interest. And why do I say this? In the committee where I sit, we've interacted with PAOs from the Eastern Europe region. And they did not participate in drafting any legislation with regards to regulation. The regulation was driven by their governments. And what they eventually found themselves in, and the governments were not even coordinating or even contacting the profession. So the governments would sit, come up with laws. Before they know it, as a PAO, you find yourself, you've got a regulator, an independent regulator based at the government. This regulator is the one that takes over the licensing of auditors, and then they start saying that those who are your members do not qualify to be given audit certificates. So these PAOs started finding themselves in conflict with the independent regulator. And the reason for that is because they buried their heads in the sand. They did not drive the process. They did not participate in the process. For us in Africa, I would encourage you, regulation is coming. Participate in it. Go to government. Help them understand what regulation is all about. Ensure that they involve the profession. Otherwise, you might find yourself with a regulator, and you may find yourself now having to explain to your members. Remember what Duncan said, you've written yourself out of a job. You may find yourself having to explain to your members why is it that some of the activities that were being carried out by the PAO have moved to the regulator. And now to the question that I have. To be an effective regulator, you need capacity. You need to have good capacity. And Patrick also alluded to the factors, the factors to consider when you're looking at what model to adopt. You require to have capacity. And we are aware that there's a challenge with regard to building capacity, both at the institute level, at the PAO level. Audit firms are complaining about lack of capacity. Private sector companies are complaining about lack of capacity. And I would like to hear from Duncan and Amaya. How have you tackled the challenge of capacity? How have you been able to build capacity to be effective as independent regulators? And perhaps Patrick can also give us a comment on that as well. Thank you.
Good. We'll take one more from here, from the lady. That's Margaret? Yeah, right over there. Yeah.
My name is Josephine from Kenya. Mine would be very quick. Just wanted to ask Duncan, whose idea was it to come up with the Independent Oversight Authority?
Thank you. You are holding the mic? Yes. All right, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Ruboa from Uganda. Mine is a concern about regional collaboration in terms of regulation. You see, many countries are struggling. Others are just having this accountancy regulation just in its infancy.
Yeah.
I understand there were efforts to have, for example, the East African, how did you call it? East African collaboration, something like that.
Yeah.
In accountancy regulation.
Yeah.
How far has that gone? And given the theme, Rising Africa and partnering for results,
Okay.
how far are we supporting other countries in that sense? Thank you very much.
All right. Members, I would have wanted to take more questions, but you'd agree with me that time is not on our side. Let's see how fast we can respond to the first 5 set of questions which have been raised. The first one by my brother from Lesotho, Manangole, the balancing between innocent until proven guilty and the aspect of the protection in the public interest. I will ask Duncan to respond to that. Then the question around capacity and regulation. Admire, how have we gone around that in Zimbabwe? And Derek can give a comment, and Patrick as well. The other one from Caroline was a comment, and I think the independent regulation is coming. The key message, let's drive it. Let's be in the position to drive the act, as opposed to allowing another body to do it. So we will not respond to that, but that's a very good advice. Then Josephine, again, to Duncan, who drove that idea in the first place? How did that idea come? So you can respond to them at one go. And then from my brother Roboa from Uganda, the East African community, the mutual recognition agreement, how far are we? Derek, you can respond to that. So we have 10 minutes to respond to those questions, then I will be concluding in 5 minutes' time.
I will start. Let me start with the question from Caroline. I will tell you it's a real big challenge. We got support from the World Bank to train staff. One of the most, I was actually telling someone the other day, it was very painful. And the World Bank spent a lot of money training us. And at the end of the day, we had people who were trained to a very high standard. And the Botswana Telecommunications Authority came with a big check, dangled it in front of one of my guys. I tried to hold on to increase the salary by 20%. It was still not enough. By 30%, it was still not enough. And then I surrendered. It was gone. Someone that were trained, for almost going 2 years, really, and with so much money spent. When I was still recovering from that, another parastatal, the one that deals with small, medium enterprises, came and dangled an even bigger check, and he was gone. So the challenge is there. The challenge is not only to us, it's on to the profession as a whole. I think the whole audit profession is going through a tough time. And I think I was having a taste of my own medicine in a way, because I had taken 4 of those guys from Deloitte. So you see, I think that is more like a vicious cycle. We'll do that and we'll go on like that. I think I'm happy because they are within the country. So the country overall is benefiting. But to us, it was a punch in the gut. That is Caroline. The whole issue of innocent until proven guilty, it's an interesting question. It's an interesting question. It's the disciplinary processes of the institute is that you can be accused of doing something, and you can get a judgment, you can appeal to the magistrate court, you can even go to the High Court. So what we are seeing is while public interest is of the essence, we still have to look at the due process that has been, that has to be followed. If I can tell you the processes that we go through as the institute is actually faster than the legal processes. So we advise our members that let the process go through the disciplinary processes of the institute. Because once you report it to a court of law, the issue becomes sub judice. So we can't continue with that. We will wait until the law of the land takes a decision on that. So bearing in mind that public interest entity, public interest protection thing, it might be a bad issue, but the law is the law.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Caroline, for the question. Capacity. There could be challenges with capacity, but my take on it is capacity has to be developed. Capacity has to be built. We have to start from somewhere. I'll give you an example of how we went about it. When we started audit quality monitoring 4 years ago, again with the support of the bank, we went to our neighbors, South Africa. How have you been doing it? What is the technology that we are using? How can you develop our people? We had a training arrangement under the project from the bank, but the beauty about that arrangement is after the project, there is still continual capacity development, sharing of skills, sharing of experiences. So for me, capacity can be developed and we can share from amongst ourselves. I'm told Uganda is the best audit quality monitoring system on the continent. One of the best. Why not ride on it? For me, to develop capacity, there are a few issues that have been cleared already. The debate on whether Africa needs African accounting standards or African auditing standards is gone and dusted. We are on international accounting standards, right? So the review process of monitoring compliance with such accounting standards has to have a common base. If the review base, we borrow the base from Uganda or wherever, is the same, then we can share resources. What I'm advocating for here is some of our professions are small. To retain those highly trained audit quality inspectors is not easy. Why not come up with a pool of technical people that have been trained in audit quality monitoring that are available for use by the different jurisdictions, because the framework that we are using at the beginning, the accounting standards or auditing standards are the same. So the cost of training, assuming we have 3 reviewers in Malawi, 4 in Zambia, 7 in South Africa, 1 in Zimbabwe, if we're trying to get a trainer to train those 17 people, the cost is the same. But if we replicate it in 10 countries, it's 10 times the cost of doing training at the same time. So if we are to share those resources, we train, have a pool of inspectors, schedule our reviews such that when it's the turn of Zambia, Zambia can choose from the pool, and we keep them on their toes. They have to utilize that space. Otherwise, they fall behind in their reviews. For me, we can address capacity in that way. In standard setting, 3-4 days ago, PAFA came up with a standard setting forum where we are saying this is the voice of Africa. Done. Why can you not do it in audit quality monitoring? It's easy, we can do it. We only need to cooperate. Our goal is the same, protecting the public interest. Public interest in Malawi is the same as public interest in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Good. Derek, half a minute on mutual recognition agreement in East Africa. Just half a minute, please.
Thank you, Chair. I invite you to attend the next session. The next session is on mutual recognition agreement or cooperation in East Africa. That's the model we are going to discuss. My president will be chairing it, and hopefully everything will be discussed. But within that model, we have a roadmap of having a joint audit quality team and training our audit quality teams together. That's what maybe I can talk about when we are looking at regulation right now.
Duncan has just some concluding remarks. I've asked him to keep it to not more than 1 minute.
It's not actual. I'm answering the lady's question. She said, where did the idea of an independent regulator come from? When a country goes through the ROSC, the report on observance of standards and codes, it came up with a number of recommendations to the country of Botswana, and then Botswana government took those recommendations and used them to drive policy change in the country. Among those recommendations were the regulation of insurance companies, were the capacitation of the institute, and also the changes in the laws, the Companies Act, the Accountants Act, and the most important one, as far as I'm concerned, is to establish an independent audit regulator. That's where it came from.
Just Chair, as you sit, I just wanted to promote, I refer to an organization called Independent Forum of International Audit Regulators. Just Chair, as a final point, there is a mutual thought of establishing a forum for Africa, and that forum will also help in terms of sharing the knowledge relating to the audit regulation. Share people like from South Africa and from Financial Reporting Council in here behind that notion, and there is going to be an event that may be held in the course of the year. So you may get some invites in the course of the year to attend such a forum and start engaging and sharing knowledge.
Thank you. Delegates, we now need to conclude. One, independent regulation is coming. Be on the driving seat. There's no doubt about it. Two, if it comes, stakeholders' involvement is important. The involvement of the profession of the government is extremely important. Three, for effective regulation, the value chain, the entire value chain must be taken into consideration so that you can then be able to completely regulate the profession. And a couple of other good points that we've covered within the last 1.5 hours. I really want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for listening to the panelists. I've enjoyed the session, and I think we need to appreciate the panelists for a job well done. Okay, so thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. Bye. Yeah.
Mic is on.
We were just reaching the conclusion that if we finish before 5:30, we're slowing down. We just finish, shall we? See how it goes. One thing we thought might be useful is once we really just get a sense, try and get a sense from the audience as to whether they know, how many of them have got some familiarity with integrated reporting.
Right.
Is this, are they here to learn what it is, or do they know a bit about it and want to know some more, or what's
okay.
and maybe get some interaction going. Yeah, okay. So that would probably be before we even go into the workshop, because then that will help you pitch your responses.
That's exactly.
Yeah, okay. It's good.
So I was involved in this right from the beginning.
All right.
And so, I mean, I'm very happy. If you asked the question about where did this all come from, I'm very happy to just talk through that because I think it's quite an interesting story of how it emerged.
Yeah.
And,
That's the first question. Yeah. Okay. I think we can make a start. Yeah, because we're 5 minutes. We're running 5 minutes late. Hello. Good afternoon, all. Hello. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending this session. I'm delighted to welcome you, and I hope we enjoy this session, which is going to look at the future of corporate reporting, specifically integrated reporting. We want to take this opportunity to look at how integrated reporting is being adopted globally. Also, we would want to explore the foundations that need to be in place to enable businesses to adopt integrated reporting. Another area that we would hope to explore would be the challenges faced by those who have adopted integrated reporting, as well as look at the role of the profession in helping organizations adopt it. I need to start by declaring an interest. I, as you know, work for ACCA, and at ACCA, we have been at the forefront of integrated reporting, and we've been involved in working with the International Integrated Reporting Council since it was formed in 2010. And our aim was really to be able to contribute to that agenda, which we feel is very important. ACCA also joined the RRC's official pilot program, and we issued our first integrated report in 2011-12. And we've championed integrated reporting around the world. Also, since its relaunch in December 2007, the ACCA qualification has been structured in such a way that it contains material that resonates strongly with integrated reporting principles. And the aim of integrated reporting was, and it still is, to ensure that organizations create value and report that value that's created in its widest sense, now and in the future. The integrated report should be a concise communication about how an organization's strategy, its governance, performance, and its prospects are reflected and communicated to the wider stakeholder. So it's really about the creation of value in the short, medium, and long term. And clearly there's a need for a new form of corporate reporting, we believe, as an organization. In a survey which we conducted in 2013 entitled, "What Do Investors Expect from Non-Financial Reporting?" we discovered that investors had lost trust in corporate information since the global financial crisis. And they believed corporate environmental, social, and governance performance information was not provided in any meaningful way that could be compared with their peers. So basically, integrated reporting tries to address this trust issue and at the same time reveal or give more information about how organizations are run. In addition, integrated reporting aims to create that value or demonstrate that value over those periods, medium, short, and long term. So it isn't about enabling a quick profit, but it involves ways of looking at value and how it's generated and sustained over the period. If we accept that integrated reporting
could be a powerful force for driving both organizational success and individual careers. Why are professional accountants the right people to take the lead in delivering it? Introducing and embedding integrated reporting into organizations will require numerous skills and capabilities. One that professional accountants already possess. There are clearly numerical and analytical aspects which lie in the professional accountant's comfort zone. The integrated reporting framework takes a principles-based approach, which is familiar to accountants who apply judgment in many areas of their work. Finance teams are already experienced in reporting to shareholders and other stakeholders through the annual report and accounts. And we believe that integrated reporting will also help in giving better understanding of how organizations are performing across the board. So this all sounds very positive, and we believe that integrated reporting is a move in the right direction. And yet, the world is still sitting on the fence as far as we are concerned from the research that we did. While our research revealed that CFOs see benefits in an integrated reporting model, including building better relationships with the external stakeholders who would also want better information, 48% of those that we surveyed were adopting a wait-and-see attitude towards the adoption of integrated reporting. In addition, 10% of those surveyed had no intention of moving towards an integrated reporting model unless it became compulsory. Only 38% of those surveyed are taking active steps towards an integrated reporting model in the next 3 years, and only 5% have already implemented one and published an integrated report. So there are clear challenges ahead, ones that I know that this esteemed panel will look to address, and it gives me great pleasure now to introduce the panel to explore this very exciting development. On my far left is Alta Prinsloo. Alta is the Executive Director, Strategy, and she's the Chief Operating Officer of IFAC. Previously, she served as Director and later Executive Director for Governance and Operations. She did that from 2009. In her role, she's responsible for the strategic planning and risk management and also the day-to-day operations of IFAC, including human resources and information technology. Next to Alta is Lee Roberts. Lee Roberts is a member of the Integrated Reporting Committee of South Africa and is a chairman of its working group. Lee also co-authored Integrate with Mervyn Keane, and I'm sure maybe some of you would be aware of this publication. And then on my immediate left is Ian Ball. I think most of us know Ian. Ian is the chair of SIPFA International, and he works with the Institute in supporting their global growth and development. He was also a former CEO of IFAC for a number of years. So, panel, welcome. And before I go to the panel, I just wanted to get a sense of how many of you here already know about integrated reporting and probably are thinking about implementing it. So first, awareness. By show of hands, please. Okay, thank you. And in terms of implementation, are any in this room who are already reporting using integrated? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you. So there are 6 already reporting. I think this is very useful context for the panel because I think it will then help them to pitch the discussion at the right level. Now, to kick off the conversation, we probably need to maybe go back to basics and look at where this all started from. So maybe Ian, could you share with us what has given rise to integrated reporting?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I should probably say that in this introduction, I have to make a confession, and I know people say you should never confess anything in front of an audience like this, but my confession is that during the period that I was CEO of IFAC, I was having the staff in the professional accountants and business area come to me from time to time and say, we should be doing more in this area of non-financial reporting. You know, the financial statements aren't good enough. And I was saying, well, you know, let's not do too much here. And part of my thinking then was that we had over a couple of decades, we'd had a number of initiatives to improve corporate reporting particularly by expanding the non-financial dimension of reporting through MD&As and things like that, but also through triple bottom line reporting and various other forms of enhanced business reporting. And first of all, none of them had ever really got significant traction. And second, when we had the Enron crisis, the world turned immediately back to the financial statements, and there was a huge focus on reliable financial statements. And so my concern was, you know, IFAC was always a very resource-limited organisation. Did we put resources into something that might not be that successful? And so that was my attitude through until, I guess, about 2008, 2009. And I hope you'll forgive me, this is a little bit of a kind of a story really, but in late 2009, there was an invitation to attend a meeting which you simply can't refuse. It was an invitation to attend a meeting in St James's Palace from Prince Charles. And let me assure you, if the British royal family still has one thing going for it, it has what is called convening power. If they call a meeting, people tend to come. So this meeting was, because Prince Charles has a well-known history of being in favour of the accounting profession having a role in accounting for sustainability, and had established the organisation A4S, Accounting for Sustainability. He called this meeting, and he got in the one room a really quite impressive group of individuals and organisations. So the accounting profession was there, the regulators were there, academics were there, investors were there, NGOs were there. It was a really diverse group. And the question on the table was, did something need to be done about corporate reporting? And if so, you know, was it really urgent? And what was persuasive individual company to tell its own story about how it adds value? And just, I mean, one way of thinking about this, and I'm just reacting a little bit to the reference to a lot of companies are being either adopting a wait and see or a negative attitude to this. I mean, in some ways what integrated reporting is asking a company to do is really no different than a company would do on its roadshow. I mean, if a company goes out to do an investor roadshow, they don't talk the investors through their detailed financial statements. They tell them what the strategy is and how they propose to be successful in the years ahead. And that in a way is also what an integrated report is trying to do, but just in a more systematic way. And I don't know whether maybe Chairman this time a little bit later, but if there are a number of organisations in the room who have actually moved on this, it would be interesting, I think, perhaps for other people in the audience to hear from them and hear what their experience has been. But suffice to say that there is a significant body of influential and authoritative organisations around the world who are really supportive of this and are making it happen.
Thank you very much, Ian. And of course, I think it's interesting to sort of learn the sort of global view vis-a-vis, you know, the South African approach. And I think it's exciting that we are leading in Africa in this regard. So that's great. Alton, I'm going to come to you, and hopefully this time you won't pass on it. But I just want to, pick from your side, how does an integrated report fit into the sort of suite of current corporate reports prepared by organizations?
Well, first, if I may, I just want to respond to a few of the comments. It's really interesting with South Africa taking the lead, but recently Zimbabwe issued a code of corporate governance very closely following the King 3 report, and they also have integrated reporting as part of that. So I think that is a huge step forward. And maybe a month or two ago, I attended a conference on financing the future. And in this conference, they were preparing for the discussion that will be taking place in Addis Ababa about how to finance the sustainable development goals. And while I was there, the group responsible for it, mainly from the UNDP, prepared what they call a zero draft document, which they plan to submit to Addis Ababa for the basis for discussion. And I met someone outside the conference, and they said, well, would you mind just having a look at the paper, because we're making a few references to accounting, and we don't know a lot about accounting, and we just want to be sure that it's good. And I said, anytime, I'll look at it. And it was really interesting to note that they do touch on integrated reporting, and that they actually suggest that integrated reporting become part of the Sustainable Development Goals and part of a way of reporting on achieving those goals. Now, they do get a little bit confused between sustainability reporting and integrated reporting, which I think is not uncommon, but it is really interesting to see how it is being picked up around the world. Coming back to the question asked, and Ian, there is a nice photo of you drinking tea with the Prince, I think on the A4S website, if anybody is interested to look at that. I'm often wondering if we chose a different name, whether the conversation would have been different. I think that we spend a lot of time talking about what integrated reporting is and what it is not. And I'm thinking, Lee, you referred to integrated, and I like to think about it as integrated thinking. And I think that if we had a different title, maybe we would have just gotten on with the integrated thinking rather than debating what this is. So I try to make it simple when I think about the other frameworks. It took me a long time to get my head around it, and as I said, as many other people, I thought it was just a different name for sustainability reporting. But then I realized it works like this, and Ian says it's not quite, but I think it does help the thinking a little bit. So if you think, just visualize with me, if you think about a puzzle, a jigsaw, and when you purchase it, it comes in a box, and at the top of the box, you have the picture. So I really think that integrated reporting, or the integrated report, is that picture at the top of the box. Inside the box, you find the puzzle pieces. So for me, the different frameworks like IFRS, the GRI guidelines, for me, they are all pieces of this puzzle. But the difference is that when you put the puzzle together, you just draw from those frameworks. You don't drill down totally. Imagine this puzzle is on the computer. If you click on it, you can drill down. You can see the full set of financial statements. But the puzzle just tells the story, the story of the company, or the picture on the box. But there are a few issues at the moment. I mean, first, this is a new factory producing this puzzle. So the color on the box is a little off. It's not always the same as the pictures. And the machine hasn't been calibrated properly. So when you put the puzzle together, then there are some overlaps and some gaps. Okay? But there is now the corporate reporting dialogue. And I believe that this initiative is very, very important to the success of integrated reporting. This corporate reporting dialogue was designed to respond to market calls for greater coherence, consistency, and comparability between the frameworks from which integrated reporting draws. So that's how I see it relating to the different frameworks, but I do think that if we want to be successful, we have to allow the CRD we have to allow the CRD to fill those gaps in the puzzle, get rid of the overlap, and work together to get to the same terminology.
Yeah, thanks. So in integrated reporting, there are lots of analogies. It's a puzzle, and I'm going to use an analogy of an octopus. So a question that companies often ask is, how does the integrated report fit in with the many other types of reports that certainly larger companies have to contend with? So Mervyn King and I often refer to it as the octopus. The integrated report is the head of the octopus. That is the concise, high-level, strategic story of your company, where it is now and where it is going forward. That is the voice of the board of the company. Underneath the head, which should be applying the IRC framework, you would have various arms of detailed information. So for instance, one of those arms would be financial reporting using IFRS, that would be your annual financial statements. Another arm might be your checklist against your code of corporate governance. Another might be your detailed remuneration report. Another might be your sustainability report with or without the GRI. So if you see that in your head, it helps companies very often to figure out what fits where.
Yeah.
What are you going to use, Ian? Everybody is waiting here in suspense.
I'll just talk about the octopus. So I think it's appropriate that I should talk about the Rubik's Cube. One of the components of the framework that we talked about is capitals, and I think what I was really saying when I was talking about the balance sheet earlier was that that's not enough on its own. So one of the elements of the framework is to say, actually, a company draws on a number of different capitals when it produces its goods or services. So there's financial capital. I'll use the terms in the framework itself, but these are not, there are no sense obligatory. If they don't work for a particular company, you use whatever terms work, really. But so there's financial capital, there's manufactured capital, physical capital, there's human capital, there's relationship and social capital, there's intellectual capital, and there's natural capital. So these are six capitals. Now, if you think of a Rubik's Cube, it's got 6 sides, and you organise them, or at least this is the objective of a Rubik's Cube, to organise them so that all the colours, all the yellows are on one side and all the reds are on a... That's not the objective with integrated reporting. The objective is not to take financial capital and explain what's happened to your financial capital in the year, and then take natural capital and say what you've done to the environment that you work within, and then take your human capital. It basically is saying a company uses these different capitals in different ways with different emphases, and the job of the integrated report, the head on, if you like, on Lee's octopus, is to tell that story in the way that works for that particular company. So, and of course, how many different ways are that a Rubik's Cube can be put together? It's in the, I don't know, billions of different ways. And the idea there is that each company's story is unique, and you want to create a framework within which the company can tell its story. So there's another analogy, but I think one of the important points is that you're telling a story about your use of more than one capital. You're telling your story about how you use and add to create value in terms of those 6 different capitals.
Because, Jim, if I could add that in today's world where everything is so connected, if you only regard your annual financial statements as important, you're just looking at one slice of the cake. Another analogy there, but the story of the company is everything. It's all its resources and relationships. You mess up one, you've messed up your financial cake.
The aspect I think that we haven't really touched on is the fact that it also has future looking. So it's easy to, no matter what analogy we use, one could still think it's history, but I think a really important aspect is the forward-looking part of it.
Thank you, panel. So a number of analogies there, but also you picked on a point around integrated thinking, and this is something that maybe I want us to explore a bit further. Is it actually happening? Is integrated thinking happening? And if I could get your views.
Let me share the data, and I'm going to hand over to the experts to really share what they're seeing firsthand. But if you look at the data that they have published around those companies that have participated in the 3-year pilot program, I think that the data clearly shows that integrated reporting is happening. And you know, when we think about what we want to cover today, there was a question about what comes first, you know, as integrated reporting and then integrated thinking, or first do you have to think in an integrated way before you can have the report? I don't really think that matters. I think that if you have an integrated thinking, you will, it will be easier for you to move to the next step. I don't think that you can do integrated reporting without integrated thinking. So, you know, when you start at the end, you will anyway be forced to the beginning. But let's turn to the data. So a few examples, 71% of the companies recognize strategic benefits from integrated reporting, and most notably that is the change in the conversation between the board and management. 79% reported improvement in management information and decision making. 96% noted greater connectivity between departments and broadened perspectives, and 79% of these companies, those that have published integrated reports, benefited from their boards having a better understanding of how their companies create value. So for me, those data pieces really underlie integrated thinking. But you can
Okay.
To me was that the answer was unanimous. I mean, everybody in the room thought corporate reporting needed something. You know, it was, as we had it, it was necessary, but it was by no means sufficient. And so from that point on, IFAC got quite heavily engaged in this initiative. And I should just comment that a number of the IFAC member bodies, like the ACCA, like the American Institute, and a range of others, were already very supportive of these moves and very engaged in them. But as I say, from that point, IFAC got very engaged. And so that meeting was in December 2009. There was agreement that something needed to be done, and it needed to be done urgently. So within a few months, the International Integrated Reporting Council was established, a new body with the specific focus on developing a framework for integrated reporting. Now, the first meeting of the IIRC Council was the middle of 2010, and between then and December 2013, it worked to put together a framework which was issued in December 2013. And I could maybe, with the chairman's permission, just could I get another show of hands? How many of you have looked at the framework that was released in December 2010? December 2013. Could I just get a show of hands? Who's looked at the framework? Okay, that's very helpful to us, thank you. So the framework was issued, and the journey since then, that was, remember, 2013 December, that framework was issued. This is not something any company is required to do. This is a market-led initiative. This is companies saying, we believe we can report better, and this framework helps us do it. Not to anticipate later questions, but as somebody who was involved in the development of IPSAS something like 20 years ago and seeing how that has made progress over that time, my observation would be that integrated reporting has made astonishing progress in a relatively short space of time. The number of people, the number of countries, the number of organisations that are engaged at this point, even now, is really, it's spread right around the world. You'll see integrated reporting being discussed and talked about in just about every country. So it's made a huge difference. And if I could perhaps just finish these opening comments, that's kind of a little bit of the background of how it came about. The question as to whether or not it will really be the future of corporate reporting. There is one fact that is quoted in one of the discussion documents that was released ahead of the final publication of the framework, which I think is something that we really need to think about, or we really need to absorb, and that is the fact that if you looked at the relationship between the value of companies and the value of assets on their balance sheet 20, 30 years ago, the balance sheet had on it something like 80% of the value of the S&P 500 companies in the US. So 80% of the value of the company was on the balance sheet. So obviously the financial statements told you a lot about that company's, where the value was in that company. Fast forward 20, 30 years, what's the answer now? If you look at the same relationship between the value of the company and the value of the assets on its balance sheet, the balance sheet now contains something like, on average, 20% of the value of the company. So what that's telling you, if you want to put it this way, is that 80% of the value of the company is not reflected on the balance sheet. So the question then is, if you want to know something about that company, if you want to understand something about how it creates value, why you might want to invest in it, the balance sheet, the financial statements are not enough. And so if there's a very short way of explaining what integrated reporting is trying to do, it's trying to explain how the company creates value. And it's obviously, therefore, more than what's on the financial statement. So I guess from this point we can then talk a little bit about some more of the details, but essentially integrated reporting is trying to address the fact that companies need to explain better how they're adding value. That's the point.
Thank you very much, Ian. So it's about adding value, and we now have learned that the royal family, played a key role in getting us to, kick off this very important, project. I just want to maybe explore that a bit further in terms of, what's happening now. So Alta, could you just share with us some organizations who are behind the integrated reporting process currently?
I think I'm going to pass that one over to Lee.
Can you look at it from a global South African perspective?
Okay, and I'm going to pass it on to Ian. But let me tell you, first of all, what happens in South Africa, because this is a pocket of excellence in South Africa, and we're very proud of it. So with King 3 coming out in 2009, Mervyn King and I saw the need to have a national body that offered some guidance, and that too stemmed from Mervyn attending Prince Charles's meeting. Because King 3 says that integrated reporting is a principle that all organizations should be undertaking integrated reporting, but didn't give much guidance. It didn't say how to do it or what indeed should be in an integrated report. So hence the need for a national body. So the IRC of South Africa comprises 12 professional and business organizations, and including investors, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, internal auditors, chartered secretaries, and SAICA representing the accountants. We developed the world's first discussion paper on how to do integrated reporting and the content of an integrated report. And we're very proud to say that this did indeed feed into the international IIRC framework. We still heavily involved in promoting and developing integrated reporting in South Africa. Last year, we developed a starter's guide on how to prepare an integrated report. This is Integrated Reporting 101. If you want to know where to start, go have a look at our starter's guides on our website, integratedreportingsa.org. So this year, on the technical front, we're developing an information paper to better explain the framework's view on outputs and outcomes. And we're also contributing to King 4. So significantly, we're going to have an input and be commenting left, right, and center on what goes into King 4. King 4 expected to come out in the next 2 years. A question often asked is, how do the principles fit in with the JSE, and what do listed companies have to do? So to explain that, the JSE listing requirements, the principles of King 3, so it's the principles, not the recommendations, fall into the listing requirements. So each and every listed company on the JSE will have to do an integrated report or publicly explain why it's not. Most of them do. That's not to say that only listed companies in South Africa do integrated reports. Many parastatals and government organizations do it. Some NGOs do it. SAICA does it. And the reason is, it's better corporate reporting.
Thank you very much. Ian, could you maybe give us some global perspective?
Thank you. And I should probably explain why this has been passed back along the line here to me, in that I said that IFAC got involved in the IRC activity, and I had the interesting job of chairing the IRC working group that brought together a very wide range of different people, and that was one of the groups within the IRC that was looking at the framework as it developed. And if I could just, again, as a little bit of an aside, this was not really quite like a regular standard setting process. We were trying to work towards a framework that would essentially give people who were thinking they wanted, or companies that were thinking they wanted to report better on their activities. It was giving them a series of guideposts, but the people in the room came from some very different perspectives. There was some, what I think might be called some very dark green people in the room who really were there from an environmental perspective. That was their mission. There were others who were there very much from the business perspective. They were saying companies need to be able to explain how they add value, whether it's explaining it to their investors or to their governments or whoever. And so there were some very different perspectives. And so that was a fascinating process. And again, as a little bit of an aside, I was just in the prior session on Africa's role in standard setting. And I have to say, Africa's role in integrated reporting is completely unlike what I was hearing in that session, in the sense that South Africa in particular has been a real leader in this area, and pretty much everybody else have been followers. And it's been a really interesting demonstration of how one country with a good idea and the willingness to move early and decisively on it can make a significant difference. Because one of the things that I think persuaded a lot of people that this idea was something that had traction was the fact that the Johannesburg Stock Exchange effectively required on a comply or explain basis that companies move in that direction. So I said that the meeting that Prince Charles held had a wide range of different organisations in the room. If you went to the IIRC's website, which is www.irc.org, you'll see on the council the range of different organisations that are still engaged, and basically it's the same group of organisations that were in that original meeting. There's almost been no dropout from the initial enthusiasm to make things change in this area. So you have the organisations behind it. To answer that part of the question, all of the major accounting firms are actively behind it. All of the major professional accounting organisations, the biggest ones in the world, are all actively behind it. There are a whole range of investor groups that are behind it. The regulators are in an interesting position, because at the moment, I think it's fair to say the regulatory community thinks this is very interesting. They're watching it very closely. Some of them have made around the world, some of them have made quite positive statements, and in some of them have moved in a direction that's very consistent with integrated reporting. So at this stage it is still, with one or two exceptions like South Africa, it's still very much a voluntary thing on the part of companies. And what's happening is that companies are experimenting within the framework at producing integrated reports. So there is, as the chairman said, this is a principles-based approach, and the framework doesn't provide a kind of a checklist for companies. It does in a sense, and it says here are some things you might look at, but it doesn't. It's nothing like an accounting standard that says in detail here's how you would deal with this issue. It says here are some fundamental concepts, here are some guiding principles, here are some guidance about what content should go in an integrated report, but it's up to the individual.
So let's just go back to the definition of what integrated thinking is, and the framework does have a definition. But broadly, as Ian mentioned, there's 6 capitals, and pretty much all of those are important to your business now and in the future. And another word for capitals is just your resources and your relationships. So essentially, integrated thinking is just thinking about all of those capitals when making strategic decision-making about your company. So in decision-making about your company, you think of how the action that you want to take will impact on all of those capitals. And why would you do that? Because the way that you impact them affects you in the future. You mess up one relationship now, you have to fix it in the future. Just look at poor old Lonmin, which is a platinum mining company in South Africa, which had those terrible strikes and the tragedy of Marikana. It had to do a whole lot of spade work before it managed to get that stakeholder relationship back up and running. So we always refer to it as that integrated thinking has to be embedded at 3 levels: at your board, your management, and your employees. It's the board's role to set a holistic strategy which incorporates integrated thinking. It's management's role to implement that, and it's the employee's role to actually carry it out in daily decision making. There is a little bit of a debate going on in South Africa about which comes first, integrated report or integrated thinking. The way I see it is that integrated thinking is a journey. You're not going to change things overnight where you move from thinking about pure financial capital to thinking about all of 6 capitals. It's a journey. Any company in South Africa will tell you that it is a journey. But why I say that the integrated report was the right place to start is because you can't turn the ship. So integrated thinking is going to be a journey. And you don't have enough time to wait 6 or so years before you have integrated thinking and then you do your integrated report. When King 3 came out, those listed companies were forced to do it. They did not have time to quickly implement overnight integrated thinking. They did the integrated report, and 6 years down the line, we are still ahead of the pack. I think starting with integrated report is a really good starting point because it gets your board to think about all of those different capitals. So you've set your business model, your strategy, you've looked at your wider view of risks and opportunities, and that all that goes into your report. So my advice to anybody who's starting out this journey is to start with the integrated report, and the integrated report will help you embed integrated thinking.
My only comment really on this is that I kind of agree. I think it's, to me, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing that, you know, it's really a little bit hard to say which comes first. I mean, I know that, I mean, when in IFAC and Alta can maybe update us on this, but when we first looked at doing an integrated report for IFAC, I mean, when you first of all look across the capitals and say, well, how does IFAC use and impact those different capitals? One of the things that clearly struck me was that, well, if you look at the natural capital and environmental capital, one way or another, IFAC does quite a lot of air travel. We burn quite a lot of carbon. There's quite a big carbon footprint. Did we have any idea of how big that was? Not a clue. It wasn't one of the things we calculated. It wasn't one of the things that we considered part of our performance. So if you move towards reporting in this way, then it does make you start to, first of all, it makes you start to think about it. And secondly, if you think about it and you think it's important, then you've got to find a way of measuring it. And that's the other element that is implicit in this. You can't really report unless you've got measurement systems, and you've got to have good measurement systems if you're going to put this information out in the public arena. So it's really a combination of the incentives that are created by doing the reporting, getting the information that supports it, and I think if you're doing that, you're probably starting to think about, what's the right level of air travel for IFAC to be doing.
But that's, I think that's why I think that if you don't have integrated thinking, that the report will drive it. But I think it's important to underscore what Lee was saying, that it's a journey. Because when we published our first integrated report, we didn't really call it an integrated report. Until today, we don't really call it an integrated report. We're saying that, we're on our journey towards integrated reporting, because we did find that many of the measures were not available. But if we didn't move towards it, we would have never thought about having those measures. And working towards the measures is really what's helping us to start thinking more integrated.
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased we've been able to clarify the connection between the thinking and the reporting. I just want to touch on another area, because clearly this would involve costs. Going down the integrated reporting route would mean additional sort of resources devoted to this, and I'm sure I'll probably leave that as something to consider. But I just wanted to check from you, maybe first, Ian, in terms of the organizations that have adopted integrated reporting globally, what sort of benefits are they sort of accruing from this? I know mentioned some stats, but from your side, globally, what are you seeing?
Well, I think some of the benefits, Alta did mention them, and I think some of the key benefits are in the nature of the conversations that the board has. I think it changes, and it's interesting that there's a few representatives here from professional accounting organisations that have adopted integrated reporting, and indeed it was one of those. In fact, CPA Australia, I heard a really interesting report from the chief executive of CPA Australia about how their move towards integrated reporting was really changing the nature of the conversation that the board had, and that it meant that the board was much more focused on strategic issues that faced the organisation, and much less on the kind of business as usual compliance related things that boards often get bogged down in. So I think that's one of the, really one of the key benefits. I think there are other benefits in terms of communications that within the organisation, as you move towards integrated reporting, there's better communications inside the organisation, because you're trying to identify what the connections are between different resources, different parts of the organisation, and so there's greater internal communication. So, and those things are, Alta was identifying some of the benefits, and there is an IRC document which looks at the experience of the pilot program companies, and they do describe the sorts of benefits that they're seeing from the adoption of integrated reporting.
Yeah, okay, so here's what South African companies see it, and I hope you forget the "yeah" bit. So they see the benefits as internal and external. So there's a long list of internal benefits. This is the way you should be managing your company, and to my mind, the internal benefits are better than the external benefits. So here's what South Africa says. It gives a better understanding of the true risks of the business. It's much wider than financial. It includes all your resource and relationships. A better awareness of the key resource and relationships to your business. It's helped the business model and strategy to be more informed and holistic. It's helped better understand the needs of your stakeholders. It's increased understanding of the board. A bit scary, that one. It's helped internal reporting systems and processes. It's helped raise awareness of key sustainability issues to the business. It's helped align internal and external reporting. Hasn't that not for so many years been the holy grail of accountants? It's reduced silo thinking in the business, and it's helped embed integrated thinking.
Thank you very much. I just want us to now perhaps consider what needs to be in place for organizations to be able to prepare integrated reports. So what are the sort of key elements that need to be in place? Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. You have to have your board on board. And this is because the board sets the strategy. So they have to be aware of the key resource and relationships, and they have to set your business model and to put out the strategic objectives and the strategy. There should be one executive who is responsible for preparing the integrated report, and that's a whole another debate about who should be responsible. You have to have non-financial systems, reporting systems in place. You have to have stakeholder engagement. You have to have strategic KPIs, and as Mervyn always likes to say, KRIs as well, key risk indicators. Practically, what the companies in South Africa are finding really works is to have a steering committee, an integrated report steering committee, and that's made up of various people from different divisions who all have an interest in integrated reporting, and they sit there, they would start at the beginning of the year, they would see what their material and issues are, and they would map out the process going forward. And then they really kick into gear at about 6 months, and then 6 months, pretty much there's fast momentum. But if I can share any wisdom, it's to have the steering committee, because companies in South Africa have really shown that that's the key to it. Just to briefly iterate then, so if the board sets a business model and strategy, and then that flows throughout the report, and again, the steering committee should be working on that and work on material issues. The material issues of your report do need to go back to the board to be approved.
Thank you. Would any of you want to add to that?
Maybe only just to reinforce the importance of the board's involvement and buy-in, but also maybe to just comment that to me there's something about integrated reporting that's very consistent with the things that board ought to be looking at. And one of the jobs I've had as part of my involvement with the IRC is to stand in for the IRC chief executive when he can't do a speech. I've done a few of those in his place, and I've found amongst some company executives and management level people a little bit, I guess, resistance. It's like they're saying, what, another report, this is going to be hard work, we really don't want to do this, don't we do enough already, we're already reporting 17 different things to different government agencies, and one more is really not attractive. And then I did a presentation to the Institute of Directors in a company, and it was really interesting that they identified with this, I thought, much more naturally and much more readily than the managers did. For them, this was kind of raising the sorts of questions that they really thought were important and that they were interested in. So, A, I think the board involvement is critical, but B, actually getting the boards involved, if they really understand what this is about, is probably going to be easier than getting some of the management.
Because this is the board's report. So the integrated report is the voice of the board. The board can be held accountable to what gets said in the integrated report. This is not a PR document. This is the voice of the board.
Chair, I wonder whether I could just ask a question, because when not the previous question, you started off talking about cost, and then we moved on to benefits, and then we moved on to who plays a role. And I mean, just our own very limited experiencing on our journey, it does take a lot of time. And so we didn't really touch on the cost. And I'm just wondering, from your experience in South Africa, if you look at the cost versus the benefits, then what would you say about that?
Well, as an advocate of integrated reporting, I would definitely say that the benefits outweigh the costs. It has been an issue raised by companies that this is an extra layer, but it actually isn't. This is replacing your annual report. And practically, your direct cost saving is that you're going from a 600-page annual report to a 100 or 150-page report. You've saved a whole lot of money on printing, and you would have also saved a few trees in the process. If you follow the octopus model, then you're just printing the top. You're printing your integrated report. You don't even have to print it, actually. And all the rest of information can be on your website. So any detailed information can be on the website. Again, it saves you printing a huge wad of a sustainability report, for instance.
Thank you very much. At this stage, I know this might be a bit different from other sessions, but what I'm trying to do is to draw in those who have had experience in terms of preparing integrated reports. So at this stage, could we have from the audience maybe a couple of those who've had experience? Maybe if you can share with us your journey and some of maybe the experiences that you've had. Any of the organizations here? Yeah. Yeah, it's fine, yeah. Yeah, could we have the in front here, please?
Thank you, panelists. Integrated reporting is quite an interesting reporting strategy, even though it's new to us as professionals, but we have all been doing it, even though in different ways. I'm Mariam Ladi Ibrahim, Nigeria, Anan. I have opportunity of being the chairman of Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. We as Nigerians, we have just exposed the corporate governance code for people to contribute to it under the Financial Reporting Council board. And when you talk about the integrated reporting, it is more related holistically to the company as said by the South African representative. We're talking about your strategic plan, looking at how you are able to, the roadmap toward adding value to what you do. And you are able to equally take your SWOT analysis at the end of the day to see your strength, your weakness of the organizations, and that makes a great contribution to your reporting strategy at the end of the financial year. Of course, anybody looking at your financial statement and looking at that broad statement about your organization under the integrated reporting, it's a broad thing. You make a broad statement. We as a country, having adopted IFRS holistically, is part of what we expect the public interest companies to actually give its reporting to all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other experiences to share?
Okay, thank you.
My name is Stuart Msekiwa from Zimbabwe. Mine is not an experience, but it's on the advantages of integrated reporting. What I've noticed, especially where I come from, is in terms of responsibility and accountability for campaign performance, it tends to lay mainly on the finance function of the organization, because they're the ones who take the report to the board and present it. They're the ones who are quizzed on campaign performance. But the good thing about integrated reporting, it takes that responsibility to the corporate level, to each and every function of the organization. And also my thinking in terms of who should prepare that report, I think it must be a rotated role. This year it might be the executive or director responsible for function A of the organization, next year for the other function, so that each and every function of the organization, they take responsibility for campaign performance. Thank you.
Okay, one last comment and then we...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Joseph Owolabi. I represent ACCA from Nigeria. I would like to make some comments on the discourse. First of all, the role of South Africa is exemplary across the globe, but one of the things I also discussed with Lee is that we need to find a way of transferring that knowledge across Africa. So from my experience, I work with Ernst & Young, and I lead integrated reporting and sustainability for West Africa. Most of the projects you find in Africa when it comes to sustainability outside of South Africa are projects driven from either Europe or Canada or even the US. So I'll give you an example. O&O, which is a Nigerian company with dual listing on Johannesburg secondary markets and also listed on Toronto Stock Exchange, asked to provide such reports because of the listing requirements. My challenge is that even though there are opportunities like this for accountants to learn, you'll find that most of these engagements are done elsewhere. Okay, EY does some services for British Petroleum in over 120 countries, and some of BP's offices in Angola, all of this, but the reports are done by professional accountants in other places. So I'm looking at how South Africa can take the leadership. Okay, you've led in the world and all of that, and it's now, you know, to a large extent, GRI predicts that by 2020, all of the major economies would either mandate or require some form of sustainability or integrated reporting in their jurisdiction. How are we preparing accountants in Africa to take up this challenge? Because it is here to stay. Initially, we were thinking sustainability integrated reporting will phase out, but we now understand that it will stay. If it will stay, and by 2020, the world would have gone live on it, and accountants are not aware. You know, as I speak to you, I'm giving you the facts. Most of the engagements happening on integrated reporting are not done by Africans here, outside South Africa. They're either done in Europe. Most third-party assurance or limited assurance on sustainability reports are done in London, US. So these are opportunities that accountants locally can also benefit from. So I would employ you and the IRC in South Africa to look for ways in which you can help the region strengthen in terms of resource. Thank you.
Could I add to that? Thanks, Joseph, and it was really nice to talk to you the other day. The IRC of South Africa certainly will help wherever we can. We do have a resource shortage. So we have a big base in South Africa, but really we are keen and willing to help where we can. Just send me an email and I'll see how I can help. Have a look at our website, integratedreportingsa.org. Anything I can find on integrated reporting and integrated thinking goes in that website. That website is publicly available. So the information that I'm sharing in South Africa is freely available to anybody in the rest of Africa. Also have a look at the starter's guide. I think that will help new companies when they're thinking, well, where on earth do we start? What is step one? The starter's guide is on the website. And lastly, I want to say that I think that the IRC in South Africa has been an important development because it's the only body that kicks integrated reporting and champions it and makes sure that there's awareness. We hold events. So my advice to other countries is set up a national body with all the major business and professional organizations, that they all can come together. And in that way, I'm sure Ian would add about the IIRC link and what the IIRC can do. But have a national body and have that's at groundwork level, and that's the way to promote IR amongst your companies.
You know, when you talk to people from the IIRC, they would say they're really happy about all the support from the accountancy profession, just don't say it too loud, because we don't want to be seen to the accountancy profession to lead it, but we're happy to take all your advice and input. And so for that reason, within IFAC, we have agreed with the IIRC to establish an integrated reporting PAO network. So if you look at the IIRC, they have at the moment a business network, which is taking over the pilot program. They have the pioneer network that's focusing on the public sector. So this year we started working on the integrated reporting PAO network. And you know, I fully agree with Lee that if you can establish that knowledge base nationally, but here it's about the accountancy profession, and I want to challenge you. I really think that you have a huge role to play and that you have an opportunity to lead the establishment of such national committees. And keep your eye open for the IRPO network, because we are hoping to really make that a knowledge sharing hub where we can learn from the larger member bodies and those who have progressed significantly in this area, and then at an international basis share their experiences. And not only what's happening within the PAO, but how the PAOs are actually equipping their members to be able to render this service.
Perhaps I could, as invited, I could just say that if you look at the IIRC website too, I think you'll see really a significant amount of guidance and assistance. And I also understand that the IIRC is looking to really, even though there's a lot there now, that will be upgraded quite substantially in the not too distant future, we hope. So I think there is material available. The other thing I would comment is that the large firms are very, very engaged in this, and I think within each of the firms, I think you said you were from EY, I'm sure you'll find that the firm itself has a lot of information and guidance potentially on this. I'd just like to add one thing, and just in terms of the networks and the sharing of information around integrated reporting, Alta referred to the business network and the public sector pioneer network, because the principles of IR apply as much, arguably more, to the public sector as they do to the private sector. But the IRC also has an academic network, it has a banking network, it has an insurance network, it has an investor network, it has a pension fund network and a technology network. So there's a lot of different group things at a country level. So there really is a lot of support out there if you're really looking to move to implement it.
But Ian, the network that's missing is the SME network. And I know when I talk about SMEs, people would say, forget it. I mean, it's, you know, it's hard as it is for the larger companies. But I always think about this debate around SMEs not being able to get funding and taking their financial statements to the bank and the bank not really valuing the numbers. And I think it's because they're not good at telling their story. And I really think that's exactly what an integrated report does, even at the simplest level, is telling the capital providers the story of the organization. So I think it is very, very relevant to SMEs as well.
Thank you very much, Alta, and thanks to the panel. I'm conscious of time, and I really want to bring in our audience. So I've got two burning questions that I would like you to explore briefly, and then we will turn to the audience. There's an element of reliability of non-financial information. And in my interactions with some stakeholders, when integrated reporting comes up, what they talk about would be, well, but can I rely on non-financial information? And so there's a qualitative issue here. Now, how can this challenge be addressed? Maybe first Ian and then to the rest of the panel.
First of all, I do think that for integrated reports to be trusted, there is going to need to be some assurance